Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about job prospects. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Hi Frederick, I'm a university student graduating this summer with a master's in computer science. In my country of Denmark, it seems like it is common for graduates to go and work for consultancies. But consultancies seems to get a bad reputation because of the way that they are structured. There are many stories of bad code bases, stressful deadlines, and developers who don't care about the code as they can move on to the next project whenever they have completed their tasks for the client. Would you recommend that the juniors try to steer away from consultancies and find when finding their first job, or are there specific types of companies that juniors should aim to get into, like scale-ups? And if you are passionate and have great work ethics, is there a type of company which can grow my skills and career more than others? So all of these things are great things that you're talking about. Now, first and foremost, I want you to understand something, that the prejudice against consultants and consultancies is very much alive, and in some cases it's warranted, in some cases it's not. And I can tell you firsthand that the idea that just because you are a consultant, you are incentivized to just do short-term things is true to a point, but it is as true for them in many cases. There are situations where this is not true, but in many cases, it's the same deal for the product companies and the developers who work on the product. The reason I can say that is because I've worked with people who are hired by a company and I've worked with consultants, and I have never, ever, ever, ever seen a difference based on the job that they have in terms of how well they perform in terms of long-term thinking and things like that. The thing that determines that is down to their personality most of the time, and of course the way that the leadership and the structure of the code base is, and so forth and so forth. Because usually what a average software developer will do is to prioritize their own survival above all else. And in the wrong team, that basically means that, well, there's no accountability. Everything is sort of need to be done all the time, and they feel this constant need to deliver and so forth. And it doesn't matter if it's a consultant or not, like a full-time hire. In that situation, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to ship at all cost, which usually leads to code-based issues and stuff like that. And then you have people who don't give a shit, people who are hired by a company and are either incompetent or they don't really care about the code base, and they will produce as shittily as the consultants who do the same thing. So like, and I know for a fact that there are consultants who do a really, really great job. One of the best of the best I've ever talked to and worked with was a consultant. He did better work than like entire departments of people that were hired for the same company. I know that for a fact because I could see the level that he was producing at. And he wanted to be a consultant instead of being a real hire. So don't think in those terms. What I suggest to you as a junior is to focus on one thing and one thing only. Find yourself a place of work where you will have access to team members or peers with more experience than you, to get yourself into an environment where if you get stuck or you're unsure how to do things or so forth, then there's someone around who can either help you answer your questions, or that you can learn from by just observing how they write code, and then you submit your work and they are going to give you feedback on your work. These people, they don't need necessarily to be the best of the best. That's not what's important, because what you are doing right now is that you are going through basic training. And so what I usually tell people is that when you learn the basics, even now you have a computer science degree and stuff like that, so when you were first learning software development or computer science, it matters very little who is teaching it. The main thing is if they can teach you and you learn from it, but the content doesn't differ. If you go to a really fancy school versus like you take an online course or something like that, depending on the structures, of course, but the materials don't change. The way that we write software and all the different algorithms or whatever you have, like they are the same. So it's really down to you and adopting those tools. And when you first learn those basics, you don't know anything, so it doesn't matter who's teaching it to you. You can, of course, pick up some bad habits, but that's inevitable. But that can also happen if you are over engineering things on your end and so forth and so forth. So guys, it is okay to be new, to be a fresh graduate or a junior or something like that, never done anything before. It is horrible, I know, because I still see people. You have no idea, guys. Like I had a interview 2 days ago with a senior software developer who had gone into product management and been there for a few years, and now he wanted to be a software developer again. So he does an interview with me and one of my coworkers, and we talk to him about things and so forth. And the norm is, guys, that even when they're that like with tons of experience and stuff like that, if they don't know, they will try to pretend that they know because they feel bad over the fact that they don't know. It's basically I will go as far as to say it's almost an inherent thing to most people. If you don't know a thing or so forth and so forth, most people will feel bad about it. Try to get away a little bit from that. I know it's easy to say. I mean, I have the same problem. Even in interviews, when I get asked a question I'm not 100% sure, but my instinct isn't just to admit immediately I don't know. My instinct is going to be to I do the thing I usually tell you guys. That's what you're should listen for if you're trying to figure out if someone's familiar with a topic or if they're guessing and stuff like that or unsure. And this is completely normal. And so when you first start your first job, it doesn't really matter if you are in a group of people who are like top notch, the best of the best, or so forth and so forth. What matters is when you go there, and if you continue doing your self-studying and you really have these ethics and stuff like that, and you learn on the side and you see what good practices are like what is promoted in the public space, like online and stuff like that, you compare that to your own work, and you take the stuff that is useful from your own work and the stuff that you're learning from the outside, and then you will sort of get a holistic understanding, like a basic understanding of if the stuff that you are doing in your project is that shitty work, is it good work. Like in the beginning, as I said, it doesn't really matter because you have never touched real code, so any exposure to a real work environment will teach you something. And unfortunately for you, you can't know this going in. You have to sort of just wing it. That's why in the interviews and so forth, you should be asking about like, do they have like, yeah, since I'm a junior software developer, am I gonna get like to be in a team, or will I get someone to like help me if I'm not sure, so forth. Like these are the feelers that you should put out there because that is more important than what type of company you're working on. Minor things can be like if you in a scale up or something like that, if they don't have the budget or stuff like that, that's of course a risk. But the main thing is to figure that part out, because I promise you it will make a world of difference for your future career and your comfort and stress levels and everything like that if you have a group of people around you who are a little bit more experienced than you and have a little bit of oversight with the fact that you're new, and they like sort of are a little bit more forgiving, and have them back you up and teach you the stuff that they know. And I promise you, before you know it, you will know everything about that place of work, and you will figure out that there are more ways of doing things, and then you find better ways and stuff like that. And then once you have a little experience, I usually say 1 to 5 years, but that's the norm. Once you have those 1 to 5 years, you can, like, the world is your oyster basically, assuming now that you have the real skills and stuff like that, because now you have gone through basic training, you know the gig. Even after 1 year, you're probably going to see a difference in how people are responding to your applications and stuff like that. But getting that first year or the first 1 to 5 years and really making those qualitative years, that's more important than where you work, how much you earn, all of that stuff. Those things are, like, I promise you, if you take it to the extreme, if you take me for example, I now out earn most of the people who have worked at least twice as long as I have. And that is not because I just clocked in and did a little bit of here. That, like, I have a range of experiences and I've been really nerdy about my craft for quite some time. And I never ever focused on the salary when I was in my early days. I focused on learning, mastership, getting a broad profile, knowing what matters, what doesn't matter, and really, really learning my craft. And now I outpace the people who only did it for the money. So what I want you to take away from this is that my suggestion to you is that if you are a junior software developer, don't focus so much if it's a consultancy, a scale up, or like a big corporation or anything like that. Focus on finding a role that puts you in a team of peers, ideally with a little bit more experience than you, and that they will support you and answer questions and stuff like that if you need it. It's really hard to say that, I mean, sometimes big companies are better than smaller companies because they have more money, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's always the case. There's quite a lot of large corporations who have really stressful environments and teams that have to do kind of a lot of stuff. So you have to play it a little bit by ear. And the worst part is, unfortunately, you don't know exactly how it's going to turn out, because these social things, you can't really check for that in the interview to the same extent that you can check what tools are they using and stuff like that. That's easy. But that is what you should focus on, and then do what I call basic training. And basic training just means that you learn how to work in a software team. You learn what it means to ship to production and see people use your code and stuff like that. You do that for a little while until you feel like you sort of know how they're doing stuff in that specific project. Keep on doing your private time stuff, like do your own projects, read the newsletters, and keep up with the date with stuff. And you're going to start to see a pattern between the work that you do and the stuff that is in the public eye. And sometimes you're going to figure out that the stuff that you are doing is kind of shit, or it's actually pretty good. And then sometimes you're going to figure out that just because it's on a newsletter or Google does it or stuff like that, it may not necessarily be the case that that is the best idea for your product. And that's where you're starting to mature. And once you have a little bit of basic training and you know what it means to read, the lingo, and you know how to commit code and do all these sorts of things, right, and basically be responsible for a system, then you can start asking yourself after a while, is this really an environment where I'm really get to touch the most interesting tech, or like do the most interesting work and stuff like that? And if it's not, then you can go on the job hunt. But my suggestion is to you to not overthink that part in the beginning, because you might have more than one job during the course of your career. So the most important thing is that you just learn the things that makes you applicable for the next role, and then the next role, and then the next role. Focus on getting a really good foundation of skills. And usually in the beginning of things, the best way to get those skills is through having nice coworkers who are a little bit more experienced. Once you get to be a senior, like say myself, or people like more experienced than me, then it literally doesn't matter if you're alone on a project or if you have 100 people working with you. It really is just up to your own preference, because now you know everything, so you don't really need that support network to the same extent. But in the beginning, that's a really good thing to have. Have a great day.